Welcome to Life, Lessons, and Laughter with your host, Glenn Ambrose.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. I was just thinking, sometimes I do 2 recordings in a row if I'm feeling it. And for those of you who watch consistently, all you got to do is pay attention to my shirt. If I've got the same shirt on 2 recordings in a row, there's a good chance, or my hair looks the same. There's a good chance that I'm doing 2 in a row. Today I'm doing 2 in a row. So I want to talk to you guys about manipulation because it runs rampant in the world, and we all do it to some degree. So it's of course we have to look out for it, and but let's be careful not to judge too harshly, because honestly we all do it. So it's so I was thinking about this topic, and it made me think of the Celestine Prophecy, a great book, actually the first book I read when I woke up, which to me is interesting. It's like I'm not much of a reader, so when I woke up, I'm like, oh, I think I want to start reading and taking in information, and I want it to be spiritual because that's everything, and I can see that now. But I don't think I want it to be like some educational self-help type book. I think I want it to be a story, so it kind of pulls me along through it, and I learn as I go. And I started going up to people and asking them, because I had no idea where to begin. And I said things like that to a couple people, and they said, yeah, that's Celestine Prophecy. I was like, oh my God, I didn't even know there was books like that out there. So yeah, this was the first book I read, and I really enjoyed it. And it really helped me learn a lot. This isn't, it's not a factual book, but the author was James. I pulled it out, so I have it handy. James Redfield actually has a following that started with this book, because this book makes so much sense in so many ways and explains so many dynamics and stuff in life that people were like, is this real? They started wondering if it was fact-based. But it's not. It's just very insightful. So there are certain things that it helped me really put into place, and this is one of them: understanding dynamics between people. And there can be different versions of this, which I pulled out the part that I really like. And basically what he does in this book is he explains 4 main types of manipulation. And it's basically what he says is it's how we steal energy from each other, how we get psychological boosts and stuff. So I'm not going to go into that too much, but the four main ways, and there are variables or variable degrees in these, so I think that people can find manipulation tactics that are kind of based on these, but are a little bit different in varying degrees, so keep your mind open that it's not necessarily just these 4. But the 4 main ways that he describes in the book are, let's see. You ever looking for something, and the harder you try, right? So I had to relax, and then I saw it. So the order of dramas goes this way: intimidator, interrogator, aloof, and poor me. Okay, so that's the four main things. And a lot of times the way he describes it is the intimidator kind of matches up with the poor me a lot, where the interrogator matches up with the aloof more. So an intimidator, of course, basically steals energy or gets what they want by intimidating people. They're very aggressive, and they're the easiest ones to pick out, right? Because they manipulate through aggression, right? Now, so if they dominate somebody, then they they get a psychological boost or energy out of dominating. So that is one way. Now, the other side of that people don't see as often, but we're starting to see this more and more. People are starting to become aware of the victim mentality, which is the poor me. People that are playing the poor me, oh my God, this person did this to me, and oh, life did this to me, and all that stuff. The way they get a psychological boost is people feeling sorry for them. It's less obvious, but they get energy. People freely give their energy. Oh, you poor thing. Oh, that's giving them the energy. Oh, you poor thing. Oh, yes, it's not your fault. Oh, that shouldn't have happened to you. Oh, they're bad and you're good. See, so we feed them, and that's how they get their energy. People only do what works. So even if it's the victim mentality, now I'm not saying that we can't have some compassion for people who have been victimized in certain situations, but my point is that giving them their energy, and if they continue to do that, that's going to be how they get energy, and they're not going to stop being victimized because they figured out a way how to be victimized and still get energy, still get a psychological boost. It's just a pattern that they're falling into. This is so that's one. So then the interrogator and the aloof are a little bit, they're not as obvious. Like the interrogator will continue asking you questions and pushing. I think they might have a explanation in here. I don't know if I'm going to go into their explanation or not, though. They're more subtle with their aggression, finding fault and slowly undermining your world in order to get your energy. Like, so like, that you just kind of almost feel guilty around them a little, like, and you're not sure why. You feel a little intimidated by them maybe, and you're not sure why. It's because they're always interrogating. They're always like, oh, really you think that way? Huh, interesting. And they won't come out and specifically tell you you're wrong. They'll just kind of make you feel like you're wrong, right? So that really matches up nicely with the person that's aloof. And you can see like the interrogator or the intimidator and the poor me are very, very different. But then as you come into closer degrees, there's less difference between these people. So, so it's not black and white. There's a bunch of gray area in between here, right? And as you get mixed in the gray, there's actually similarities to both sides. So the interrogator just never quite says that you're wrong, just almost implies it energetically, or just keeps asking questions like they don't quite believe you or something, right? So there's that type of stuff. And then the aloof is the other side of that. So they just never quite commit to anything. They're just standoffish, do you lots of people do this nowadays with making plans. Do you want to go tomorrow? Do you want to go to the beach tomorrow? Maybe. And then it'll be fun. Yeah, sometimes the beach can be fun. Sometimes you track that sand all the way home though. Well, yeah, but the ocean's right there, and you see how they're almost pulling you in by their aloofness. So this is so these are ways to understand how people kind of get energy from each other and stuff, and they can use these tactics to get what they want. So I kind of want to start off there explaining that stuff, and and the Celestine Prophecy is a great book. I highly recommend reading it. The movie was good for me. It wasn't great. Or, like for me, the book, The Shack, really, really good book. The movie, loved it. Love that movie. This one, like most situations, I think it's fair to say that probably 90% of the time the book's going to be better, more detailed, stuff like that. But anyway, I wanted to kind of lead off with that. When we're talking about manipulation, just to understand that it happens like in life. And if we understand it, we can navigate it a little bit better, but manipulation, I think I've said this before, I think the two people that manipulate the most on this planet are children and alcoholics or addicts, right? I mean, those two groups of people are like master manipulators. You have to be, as children, like when you're in, especially nowadays, where there's the last couple generations, there's not the constant presence of physical consequences, right? I mean, for 100,000 years, people just beat their kids, just shut up, whack, and that was the end of it as a general rule. That's kind of how things went. So now that we're getting away from that, people aren't really replacing it with consequences in other ways as much as they should. Yeah, I mean, I agree you shouldn't beat your children, but I do agree that there should be consequences. So, like, if you're not going to beat your children, you have to replace it with something, why? Because they will manipulate you to death if you don't. And they'll go out in life attempting to manipulate. And people who don't care about them, like you care about them, aren't going to put up with their manipulation techniques. Like, a lot of times the bosses, if you're not doing your job, you'll get fired. It doesn't matter what manipulation technique you come in. At some point in business, they're just going to fire you, even if you're really good at manipulating. I can testify that to as being an alcoholic for 20 years, because I got very good at manipulating situations, and, I could talk myself out of anything. And and I was a good worker when I was there, but, so people would try to keep me on, but at some point it was like, Glenn, I mean, there's nothing I can do. You just didn't show up, or you hung over every day, or, at some point you can't manipulate your way out of it, and you just end up losing the job. I didn't want to, like, most times I could feel that coming on. So I would just either quit and say I didn't like it, or I would start a fight with the boss and storm out and say I quit, just because I knew I was going to get fired anyway on sometimes conscious, sometimes unconscious level. So I would just be a little more assertive, because I never liked playing the victim. So, like, I would just be like, screw them. Although, I did play the victim. I was a good manipulator. I was an alcoholic. So I played, like, you can't stick to one tactic to be a master manipulator, because people figure you out, right? So this is an aspect of manipulation. So to be aware, especially if you're dealing with children or addicts and alcoholics. But anyway, anybody, you got to pay attention to this stuff when they change tactics. If you're concerned somebody's manipulating you, just listen to this podcast, and you're going to be able to see what they're doing pretty clearly. I think that's the whole point of this podcast. So like I said, they change tactics. And when do they change tactics? It's when they need to. It's when it's felt. It's when, like, we all read energy better than we think we do. So when you're manipulating somebody and you're making, like, let's say the manipulation technique is to make excuses for your behavior. Oh yeah, but you don't understand. It wasn't my fault. My car broke down. Like, what do you want me to do? Like, bring you the bill from the mechanic. I mean, okay, and hell, I even go get a bill from a mechanic, a fake one, or make one myself, whatever. But my point is if somebody's making excuses, well, you don't understand. Yeah, but it's not my fault. At some point, that starts running out of steam. Like, you can only make so many excuses for your behavior until people get sick of your excuses, right? So when you can sense they're starting to get sick of your excuses, it's not too hard to tell. All you got to do is pay attention to their reaction, and how they treat you after. Like, if their initial reaction is, oh yeah, I get it, don't worry about it, Glenn, well, then they're buying it, right? But then after you've done it a bunch of times and their reaction is kind of like, oh, Glenn, they'll give you warnings like that, like, oh, Glenn, come on, man, this happens too much. They'll like literally even tell you like that, so you just pay. And sometimes you can just read their energy, but like, once you've made so many excuses, well, then it's time to change tactics. Then you can't do excuses anymore. So then maybe you fall into victim mode. Then it's like, you're hurt or you're sick. It has to be something that's not your fault. Okay. Like, it has to be something that's not your fault. You have to make up a story where you're the victim. Because then how can they be mad at you? You're the victim in this situation. That's not allowed socially, to get mad at the victim. So that's, so you can change tactics. And you can feed off their sympathy, right? So these are different manipulation techniques. So whatever somebody is doing, if they change tactics after a while, like, that's to throw people off. So you're kind of aware. So they'll have to go into a different direction, and usually usually it's aggressive. Don't judge me. Blah, 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 blah. And then, like, once that starts getting old, then they'll go into the soft energies. Oh, like, oh, it's not my fault, but I'm the victim here. Don't you love me? They'll stop playing on your sympathies because the aggression isn't working, right? And if they're being sympathetic, if they're playing on your sympathies first, well, then they'll flip to the aggression, right? So if they're more, their standard is more of the aloof, more of the victim mode. Oh, poor me. It's like, please, you don't understand. Don't judge me. It's not my fault. All that type of stuff, right? If that's kind of how they usually play it, and then all of a sudden that stops working, you just stop feeling sorry for them after a while. And you're like, oh man, but nothing's ever your fault. Well, then it's time to get aggressive. So whatever, if one is more passive, then you switch to a more aggressive mode. If it's aggressive, then you switch to a more passive mode. That's how you change techniques. You keep them varying, and it keeps people off balance, right? Like, I mean, I know this stuff because, one, I did it. When I was doing it, like, I was unconscious that I was doing it. People don't really know they're doing it. They actually, a lot of times, like, on some levels they do, on some levels they don't. But they're busy rationalizing their life. Like, so it doesn't really matter if they're aware of it or they're not aware of it. So it's usually a blend. They're kind of aware, but they're kind of not. But they've rationalized why it's okay for them to manipulate. So whether they're clear that they're manipulating or whether they don't know that they're manipulating, they just kind of bask in that middle area where they're a little bit aware of it and they're to some degree not aware of it. And then sometimes they just drop completely unconscious and they're not aware of it at all. That happens if they believe their own BS enough. Because if you're really going to live like this, like really manipulating, you have to believe that it's necessary. You have to believe that it's not your fault. You have to believe that this is how life is. This is what you need to do, because life is unfair and it's not your fault. So you rationalized why you're doing it. And everybody does that. Everybody does that. It sounds horrible when you're talking about manipulation that's this blatant, like I'm talking about, but most people walk around doing it on an unconscious level in less blatant ways. And they rationalize their behavior, why it's necessary. I mean, really, to some degree, like everybody does this. Like I'm going back to the intimidator, poor me, interrogator, aloof type stuff. Like everybody basically does versions of that fairly consistently. Everybody's trying to get what they want, and the more conscious you are, of course, the less you do it. But in the regular world, like, the people that aren't working on themselves, the whatever, 75% of the population or something, like, people are completely unaware of why they're doing what they're doing. Like, they're just looking out for themselves, trying to make their life look like the way they want to make their life look. And they have to interact in certain ways. And it's just, unfortunately, this is just society. So, like, don't get too freaked out about it. A lot of this stuff is just normal. I'm focusing on manipulation, which is kind of a more extreme version of what I just said. Most people do this type of stuff to some degree all the time, and it's socially acceptable. This is just how people run around in life, stealing energy from each other and getting emotional. We are addicted to this type of stuff. This is basically there's different ways you can phrase it. Like, you can call it stealing energy. You can call it getting a psychological boost. Whatever you want, it's egoic based, because it never really solves a problem. Like, it's not a healthy way to go through life. It never actually, you never actually find peace doing this type of stuff, right? So one way to explain that is if you believe in energy, right? I hope people believe in energy, but we'll use the energy. So, like, let's just say this is versions of stealing energy, right? So you manipulate to steal energy from people. Well, one that can be explained in a way where the reason that we have to steal energy is because we're not connected to source. And source is our source of energy. So it's kind of like life force flowing through us, and it's when we're open and the flow, when you're really in good space and you're open, and it just feels like you get extra energy. Like when you fall in love, when you fall in love and you just get extra energy, you just hop out of bed in the morning and you just can't wait to start your day because everything's wonderful because you're in love, that type of stuff. Like, all that energy is coming from you, right? Like, if we were tapped into, the theory is that if you're tapped into source, God, like, then you have a direct pipeline to energy and you don't have to steal it from other people. But since most people aren't connected, not in a way that they actually derive energy from their source, they might go to church every week or something, but they're not actually living their lives as though God is a source of energy. So they're not really connected to it. So then we just go around kind of just getting a little this way and getting a little that way and getting a little, but it's not actually a steady source. So it's kind of like a Band-Aid on a gaping hole. We get a little bit, but then we have to do it again and get a little more. And then we have to do it again and get a little more, because it's just a finite amount. So we become addicted to to this type of behavior, getting more, getting more, getting more. This is why people are addicted to complaining. Complaining is another form of this. So because complaining, it gives you an ego stroke. It gives you a little psychological boost every time we complain, because, Tolle explained this masterfully, I believe. And, he said complaining is an ego stroke because basically on an unconscious level, it's implying that if it were up to you, whatever you're complaining about, if it were up to you, it wouldn't be happening that way. Right. So like if we complain about a president, well, what you're implying on an unconscious level to your ego is that if you were the president, you wouldn't do it that way. Right. So like he explains it with ordering soup. So if the soup is cold and it's supposed to be hot and you complain, why is the soup cold? Who serves soup cold when it's supposed to be hot? This is ridiculous. It shouldn't be like this. That's implying if you were the chef, you wouldn't have served it that way. Therefore, you're better. And the person who served it cold is lower than you. So that's an ego stroke, right? Whereas dealing with the actual situation is not complaining. Like by saying, excuse me, this soup is cold, but it's supposed to be hot. Could I get this heated up, please? See, that addresses the problem without complaining. So there's no ego stroke. You just address the problem, right? So when you complain, that is just stroking the ego. So this is why people get addicted to that, is because we need those ego strokes, because we don't feel good about ourselves. We're not connected to our source to have that unconditional love in the way that we need it, or we're not conscious that we are, or whatever. There's some work to do there, right? So we're not, and there's some work to do on our own self-love. So then complaining makes us feel just a little bit better about ourselves. But then we have to do it again and again and again and again, because it's fleeting. It only makes us feel good for the time that we're doing it. Then it's gone. Then we'd feel like crap again. So this is what's happening on a deeper level. So this manipulation is just, it's embedded into our society in so many ways. I'm just trying to explain some obvious ways so that we can look out for them and see it for what it is. And a lot of times it's to prevent enabling, because that's what happens a lot of times with our children, with people that are going through difficult times. The reason that people, I know a lot of times it can look like adult children. Our children do it like on a daily basis, just for anything. To get a lollipop, they'll manipulate. To watch what they want to watch on TV, to do anything, because like you're a source of, to some degree, unconditional love. Like most kids know that their parents aren't going anywhere, as a general rule. So like and most parents have gotten pissed off at their kid and their kid still lived, right? Like eventually the parent got over it, right? So a kid knows this. Once he knows that you'll get over it eventually, well, then, and I'm not implying that you shouldn't get over it eventually. I'm just saying this is one of the reasons why kids learn to manipulate, because they know that you're going to get over it. They're still going to eat. They're still going to have a roof over their head, and you'll get over it. So that gives them the freedom to try things, to try to get what they want. I took it outside the house. I used to do it with teachers and principals, but like for me, it was intriguing. Like I used to like figuring out systems. Like I didn't like manipulating people, believe it or not. Like when I was young, I never manipulated people consciously to try to get what I want per se. There are some people that do that, but most don't. Most actually, how do I explain this? Most people do it to get what they want, but it's not like, but like I said earlier, they think that they have to. It's not just like, oh, I want $20, and I'll say and manipulate people in any way I need to get it. It's not that. That's like malicious. Most people aren't malicious with it like that, right? Because like I said, it's rationalized away. So it's kind of floating in between the conscious and unconscious, and even if it is conscious, it's rationalized. So most people float there. So I used to like understanding. I didn't like manipulating people at all. I liked being honest with people actually my whole life, but like I used to like manipulating systems, because then it was like, hey man, you created the system, not me. So like when I could find loopholes in the school system, or the police systems or whatever, I used to love that, because I would use it against them. I'd be like, oh, hey, I'm just playing the game your way. It's not my fault. You wrote the rules, not me. I'm just playing the game the way your game. It's your game. Like, you can't get upset with me by playing your game just because I happen to be winning. Like, so that took the personal piece out of it, and jobs. I used to do that. Like I would look at the manual there, like if I wanted to try to figure a way to manipulate something, I'd look at the manual and look at their rules and how they were written. And I'd be like, oh, okay. Well, it says this. Okay, well, then I'll do that. And then when they come at me and say, well, no, you're not supposed to do that, I'm going to be like, well, yeah, I can. It's written right here. Like, it's your rule. I used to love that because it was more impersonal. And it like, so I didn't feel like I was manipulating a person. I just felt like I was like, hey, it's me against the system. I don't like the system, and I'll use it against itself, So that was the type of stuff that I always liked. But as an alcoholic, for 20 years, I needed to manipulate and rationalize. So I did. So I got good at this stuff. This is why, like, sometimes some of my clients have spouses that are addicts or alcoholics or children or something. And I can explain exactly what they're doing because I used to do it. Like, it's so clear. It's so clear when you understand manipulation, what people are doing. That's why I'm doing this podcast, to try to help you guys understand this. So it's, they will feed off your sympathies. They will attack your character. But look at those two particular things, right? Feed off your sympathy, right? That's passive. Oh, don't you feel sorry for me? That's more passive, right? Attacking your character is aggressive. They'll go from one to the other. And sometimes people will just constantly bounce back and forth. Those people don't really care what they look like, though, at least to the person that they're doing that with, because it kind of makes them look a little crazy. But that's another manipulation tactic. See, so some people have, like, they try the passive, they try the aggressive, they go back and forth. And then, like, what happens over time is people start picking up on this. So then they'll just oscillate back and forth constantly. They won't wait for one side to get old and then start trying to get onto the other side. Like, they won't wait until the passive sympathy one starts getting old and then go to the aggressive one. They'll just go passive, aggressive, passive, passive, aggressive, aggressive, passive, passive, aggressive, passive, 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 aggressive, aggressive. Like, they'll just keep oscillating back and forth with no particular pattern. And they look crazy when they're doing that, but they know exactly what they're doing. Like, because that keeps the other person completely, like, if somebody's deemed crazy, a lot of times people just take their hands off of it and let them get away with stuff, because you're not going to win no matter what you do, right? So you just have to give in all the time, no matter what technique they're using. Now, but you'll see, if you pay close attention to somebody like that, they don't do that with everyone, because some people won't put up with it. So then all of a sudden you'll see them drop into patterns, like, like sometimes with like somebody like that. I'm just going to make up a scenario, right? Like, let's say you have an adult child that does that, right? And with you, they just oscillate back and forth and look crazy. Why? Because it keeps you on edge and you never know what to expect, and therefore you're more easily manipulated, right? But then when they go with their grandmother, they don't see their grandmother quite as often, right? And their grandmother is very lovey and emotional, so they can just play the sympathy thing with them all the time. They never get aggressive with that person. Why? Because they don't need to. Like, they found what works consistently with that person, and they haven't overly done it, or at least the grandparent has never caught on to it. So they just stay with that one technique. And then maybe with a sibling, they're always aggressive, like almost always aggressive. Why? Because their sibling drops into the sympathy. So they kind of know their roles. So they just basically stay there all the time. Unless it really gets too far, then they might drop off the aggression and go into sympathy, but it's very rare. So do you see how, like, they just read the situation and do what works? So, that's like the explanation of manipulation. I think I'm going to end that there. What we need to do is bring in awareness. We just have to bring in awareness and understand that these are techniques and tactics, and not get drawn into the emotionality of it. If we're drawn into the emotionality, if somebody acts aggressive and then we drop into passive sympathy, then you're screwed. If they drop into passive sympathy, and then all of a sudden, we can't be strong, then you're screwed. So, like, my point is you can't let their radical behavior control the situation. You just got to stay on the point and not get pulled into the emotion of it. The emotion is where the manipulation happens. If you can pull on somebody's heartstrings and make them feel a certain way, then you can manipulate them. But if you can't make them feel a certain way, and this, like, if they can't make you feel a certain way and you just stick to the facts and allow them to have their behavior, then they can't manipulate you, right? So, like, let's say you have an adult child that's trying to manipulate you and they're trying to get money off of you, and you just say, okay, listen, from here on moving forward, and it's always better to have a conversation like this, honestly, when you're dealing with somebody like this, because you got to set the ground rules and let them know what you're trying to accomplish to some degree. Because otherwise they're just going to completely flip. They'll probably completely flip anyway, but this lessens it because they know what you're trying to accomplish on an unconscious level. So like, if you explain to them, hey, listen, like, from now on, like, the money thing is an issue, so I can't keep giving you money. So, and make it about you, not about them, not about their manipulation, about what you're doing. So, listen, the only thing I'm going to be able to do is I'm going to be able to give you $50 a month, or $100 a month, just to help you out with whatever you need. And I'm just not doing any more than that. Okay? And I'm sorry, but that's just how it's going to be. So you're going to have to take care of the rest. And that's just how it is. So let's just, I can hear the ego going in. Yeah, but Glenn, you don't understand my situation. Whatever. Reach out. We'll figure it out. But I'm trying to keep this simple for instructional purposes. So that's what you say, right? And then they come back, and of course they want more money. And you just be like, no, I'm just sticking to the agreement. Yes, but, and then they play on your sympathy. No, sorry, sticking to the agreement. Then they get angry because their sympathy didn't work. And then you just go, no, I understand you're upset with me, but I'm sticking with the agreement. See, you stick with whatever you say you're going to say you were going to do. No matter what technique they throw, you just, no, this is what's happening. You don't allow their manipulation tactics to change what you're going to do, because as soon as you do, then they manipulated you and they won. And what they learned through that, what you're training them to do, what you're teaching them, is that if they continue on with their manipulation tactics enough, eventually you'll cave and they'll get what they want. And then you're starting over from square one, right? So you have to be consistent. You have to stick with it. Don't cave no matter what. because they're going to come up, most likely, they're going to come up with some really good stories, and you just can't bite. So that's it for this one. You know what? I'm hungry, and I'm going to go get some food. So that's going to do it. Hopefully that helped you guys. So, yeah, that'll do it. So peace for now. Talk with you guys soon.